Thanks for joining us for Subject to Change. We're here with Diane Ferguson to learn about toxins and avoiding them.
Hello.
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 Look at that gorgeous ceiling that you're in. I'm trying to look at what you've got going on there. Oh, cool.
So this is an old Victorian house. When we bought this place, it was full of bat shit. And that was one of the first projects, was shoveling all that out. And we made it an apartment, and we lived downstairs and had a young woman with her child as our first tenants. And then we gradually took over. My kids loved jumping. Can you see the loft up there?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. How cool.
They used to, it was my idea. I put in that loft in, and my kids used to enjoy jumping from the loft down onto a pile of pillows and sleeping bags and making the whole house below shake.
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When you see the little microphone in the lower right, click on that to learn more. We're so glad you're here. Diane is from a town called Ono.
So Diane, where are you specifically based out of? I'm just curious because I want that context for what you're about to talk about.
I'm in central Pennsylvania in a town called Ono. Well, I live in Ono, but the mailing address is in Annville. So I guess it's Annville, Pennsylvania, but I like the name Ono. But anyway, I am a registered nurse. I was a maternity nurse. I'm a bookworm, and I taught mothers and babies about breastfeeding for many years. And I came across a book by Sandra Steingraber called Having Faith, an ecologist's journey to motherhood.
What is our first ecological system?
And the whole book was about all the pollutants and toxins that find their way into breast milk and amniotic fluid. Mm-hmm. As she was experiencing her first pregnancy and seeing a woman's body as the first ecological system that the baby encounters.
What a wonderful image.
I know, I'm like,
there's a huge toxic burden.
As I'm reading, I had 5 children. I support breastfeeding. I help mothers breastfeeding. And I'm reading this book about all the pollutants that are in the amniotic fluid, the umbilical cord blood, and the fact that I am giving my firstborn my lifetime bioburden of toxins in the fat of my breast milk. It horrified me so much. I decided I just started reading and research and reading and I was so horrified. I felt I needed to do something with this energy of horror. So, and I realized all my colleagues, the doctors and nurses I worked with, had no teaching or knowledge about this. It's relatively new. And it's not taught in medical schools and nursing schools. And so I started teaching workshops for doctors and nurses.
A professor of nursing.
So anyway, I finally became a nursing professor at Endicott College in 2013. I was a nursing professor. I taught foundations of nursing, med-surg nursing, finally found my way back to maternity nursing, but I also developed a course on environmental health, linking health and various groups of toxins and pollutants and sources. And
It's a serious question. What have we done?
I I uh I remember when I nursed my son for 22 months, I think. And I remember in that, I know I was so lucky that the firm that I worked for said, um, you have to come back in 6 weeks or you're fired. And I said, I quit. Like I was going to work out some deal and I would have ended up weaning Eric before he was ready. I just let it happen naturally, which doesn't happen very often. But during that time, I read that women who nurse their children actually have lower instances of cancer as they get older. And the first thing I said was, why? And then, because I don't think very many people say why. And the reason is because the breast milk is purging the carcinogens from your body into the mouth of your child.
Doesn't that
and
make
I
me
went
want to cry?
through
It makes me
it
want
makes
to weep.
it makes me crazy. And the old, like, I had to go through this whole soul searching moment of, is the biological benefit of my breast milk meeting his needs as far as health protection stronger than the burden of chemicals and carcinogens that I'm putting into his body? And I came down on the side of, yes, I think that the resistance and the fact when he has a cold, my body is providing solutions for that cold because the breast milk immediately updates for the child's need. All of those things, I came down on the side of yes, but I after I read that, I understood that some people might reasonably choose not to even try to breastfeed. But what have we done to create a situation where that's the thought process that you have to go through?
So far, 3 generations.
I'm reading Healthy Buildings by Dr. Joseph Allen, and he talks about a case of contamination of cow beef, like a pesticide was mispackaged and fed to cows, and those cows were slaughtered for meat and also used for dairy for quite some time before they realized that happened. And that toxin appears in the next 3 generations of people in Michigan. And Michigan tests higher than the 95th percentile for that of the rest of the United States in that toxin because of that one instance. And once they discovered that, they killed off the rest of the cattle, but that fatty retained toxin was still in the bloodstreams of people and was actually proven to cross the amniotic fluid into children, and it appears in the 3 generations since that time, which, and we, like you said, this is everywhere. We are poisoning ourselves everywhere without realizing it.
How is using toxins healthy?
IV bags and the plastics in hospitals. We're in a strange situation where we think it's healthy to use toxic materials to support our health because they're easier and they're disposable. And what are we doing? What are we doing? Yes, it's harder to clean glass bottles,
but
they're safer.
I do remember using glass bottles, and they weren't so horrible. And we did used to sterilize instruments and not just throw away things. And yeah, we've got to go back.
Yeah, the short-term convenience for the long-term toxic burden is not a good trade.
Some reflections on these revelations.
No, so those are my reflections. And I don't know, Lauren, if you have reflections. I saw your mouth hang open a couple of times.
Like, every time on every single podcast, there's these moments that for me, it's like, sometimes like, sometimes on some level, you're like, oh yeah, I've heard this before. And then somebody gives you like the cow example. I've always suspected that about the medical equipment. So like that didn't so much get me, but I never thought about the first feeding of breast milk. I never thought about the consistent feeding of breast milk. Women talk about pumping and dumping all the time after they've imbibed, right? So like, duh, like obviously it gets in there.
Bioaccumulative endocrine disruptors.
Diane, I guess one of the questions I have is, so how do we start to limit it? What do you educate people on in the courses you were teaching?
So I my way was to introduce the different varieties of pollutants and the categories. For instance, endocrine disruptors is a very big one. Substances that mimic hormones and are everywhere. Ones that are similar to estrogen, that add estrogenic effects to plastics and things that are in plastics. Endocrine disruptors are often in grooming products added to be a carrier for fragrance and color. And so you'll find it in lotions, in plasticizers to keep the plastics flexible. So some of these hormones are making an environment for women to have lots of fibroids and tumors and earlier menstruation and possibly early labor, because labor is triggered by hormone levels too. And in little boys, undescended testicles, urinary tract that is positioned improperly. They have obesogens, things that influence fat deposits and things like that. And then you'll have another category of carcinogens, things that are known to change DNA, and there'll be neurotoxins that affect neurological development and functioning. And there's just like category after category of.
Right.
And so what would I say as far as how do you protect yourself from endocrine disruptors? I say, okay, well, take away all those artificial fragrances, artificial colorings, take away the pesticides that have endocrine disruptors in them. Go for organic foods.
Avoid the toxins at the start.
With each category of of environmental pollutant, we would look at where does it come from, and how would you decrease it? Maybe not use that cleaning agent, use something else. And so I made a display of all these things for my house and work. And then as part of the course, first I put up my display for the students to see. And then as part of the course, they had to make their own displays.
Good.
And they
good because it's awareness, right?
Right. And I'd show them the resources of where to find this long garbled word that they never heard of before, and look it up and see what kind of health effects it's associated with, and make a little index card saying, well, this deodorant has methylparaben in it, and this this one it has this such and such is associated with endocrine disruption, and this cereal has BHA in it, and this one has, this dinosaur cereal has all these colorings that are associated with learning disabilities. And so it was like it grew, and they bring their own display in on their tabletops and walk by and share.
And our wrap up.
I've enjoyed every single minute of this. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing.
Please come and visit.
Oh, All right, we got to put that on our list, Lauren. We
Got a
really
road
have to
trip.
get out
We
there.
got a road
Okay.
trip.
Yeah,
All right.
excellent. All right.
All right.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
Hey,
good.
it's
And
so nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Same here.
Thanks for joining us for Subject to Change.
Thank you.
take care.
Have a great night.
Good luck.
Bye now. You too.
Bye.